Hello, everyone. My name is Adeel Yang. Welcome to Picmonic's USMLE Step 1 webinar. This is one of the hot topics that we always cover every year, and the students are usually very eager to learn more about what the best way is to prepare for Step 1. And we will begin. All right, hopefully you can see my screen. This is me. My name is Adeel Yang again. I'm actually the co-founder and president of Picmonic. I completed my medical degree at the University of Arizona, and I'm now working full-time to help grow Picmonic. A little bit more about the team. We're actually a startup based here in Tempe, Arizona. It's in Phoenix, and we are a team of about 30 people. We have engineers, software engineers, we have designers, we have artists, and just a group of very passionate, young, hungry entrepreneurs. We came together with the mission to really lead and inspire a new era of visual learning, and Picmonic was a way for us to really transform education and make learning and really eliminate rote memorization so that learning can be more fun and enjoyable. And we're joined by some pretty experienced, seasoned entrepreneurs who are helping us grow the company. And we're really excited to be helping you guys out. So what are we going to cover today? Well, to do Step 1 justice, I figure we can actually cover broadly about how you manage resources, where does Picmonic actually fit in, and what's the best way to tackle Step 1 with Picmonic. And we provide a little bit of tips around the study plan. And actually, on that note, we're going to be sending a new study plan for all of you guys who RSVP to this webinar in a few days here. So you all have that to follow. And lastly, I want to just share a few Step 1 tricks that I've picked up along the way that's helped me a lot. So managing resources. One of the most common complaints we hear all the time is we just can't get through everything, and that's very common. So if you feel overwhelmed, there's so much to learn and too little time, that's perfectly normal, and we're going to show you how to get through it. Now, most of you, I assume, are going to have about a month or 6 weeks, or some of you are lucky enough to have 2 months off dedicated time for Step 1. So we're going to keep that time frame in mind. Everything we cover and talk about here will be to address those last kind of couple of weeks or months worth of studying. The other part that we're going to really talk about in terms of managing resources is how to focus. Focus is really important, not just on the resources, but on your weakness and on the explanations for a lot of the questions. And lastly, something really important to know is you got to find out what kind of learner you are. Knowing who you are really makes a difference. Don't just listen to anyone else, me included, but definitely try to figure out what style of learning and what certain resources work for you. So we'll cover that as well and how to figure that out. So you'll probably recognize most of the resources that I'm showing here. There's just a lot, right? And we all have limited amount of time, so it's just not reasonable to expect that you can get through everything. But that's perfectly okay because all the medical students out there are struggling with the same type of problems. So with all these high-yield resources, how do you actually hone in on the ones you need? Well, this is what we've learned, and this is advice not just from myself, but our team that have gone through Step 1, Step 2, but also a lot of our users, thousands of users have given us feedback. So if we parse these resources into sort of the must-do and the nice-to-have, or if there's time category, you'll see that, people always say, I'm sure you've heard of UFAP, and it's actually true. Personally, I utilized First Aid and UWorld, which were my primary resources. I looked at Pathoma, and I used the NBME practice test. Now, I also supplemented that with many other resources, like I actually early on started doing some Kaplan questions, which were great. Sketchy Micro, a great resource there. Firecracker, Osmosis, so a lot of really great resources. And I'm sure you're wondering by now, so where does Picmonic fit into all of this? And really, from personal experience as well as working with other students, really Picmonic is meant to, especially during your last stretch of Step 1 prep, to complement these two primary resources, First Aid and USMLE World, or UWorld. And you'll see that actually Picmonic is designed so that you can follow along with first aid very nicely. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that works in a second, but keep that in mind. Now, on the subject of everyone's different, something to keep in mind is there are different study styles, right? You have people that love making flashcards, like Anki flashcards. You have people that really enjoy a more audiovisual approach. Maybe you're a person who loves to go through textbooks and read. Or maybe you're like me, where a little bit of structure can really help me continue to move forward and I get lost in my own pursuit. So lots of different types of learners, and depends on really who you are, and you have to figure that out just by giving it a try, but not knowing that you're not going to basically try to cover everything across the board. And there are a lot of other really great question bank resources out there, like I mentioned Kaplan. Osmosis has tons and tons of questions, and USMLE RX, which has they came from the authors of First Aid, and they have a lot of extra questions as well. But the reason why UWorld is a must-do, and I think this is something that most students will agree with, they just have such well-designed questions. Their explanations are so money. You learn by reading their questions and reading their explanations, and it's super high yield. So we'll talk about that. So how do you use Picmonic? Well, I'm going to kind of break it down into 3 categories. First is how you navigate through Picmonic, so that we can provide you with some structure and how to actually complement that with these other high yield resources. Secondly, how do you actually search or find topics you need? Because actually Picmonic covers a lot of different topics. And lastly, I'm going to show you some ways that you can have a little fun with it, so that during your long stretches of studying, doing question banks, you can actually take a small break, use Picmonic when you're at the gym, or you can even create your own Picmonic. So we'll cover that. All right. So Picmonic, actually, believe it or not, we cover about close to 1,200 or 1,200 different topics covered in the first 2 years of medicine. And to put that into perspective, we cover about 80% of first aid. And last year, I think we covered about 65%. So we continue to add more topics to the library, so that at some point you can actually have these nice audiovisual mnemonics for every single topic in first aid. And that's kind of our goal. But for now, you can actually see that we cover across multiple different topics, like pharmacology, microbiology, biochemistry, pathology, physiology, and all the different organ systems. So how do you actually find them? Well, with all those topics, we want to make it easy for you. So here's a screenshot of our website, and you'll notice I've circled 2 areas. If you are already a subscriber, or you've already signed up to our platform, then on the upper right-hand corner, you can simply log in. But if you haven't, I encourage you to just click on the button that says I'm a medical student, and you'll come to this page, which is basically a breakdown of all the different pathways. And we call pathway, like anatomy is a pathway. And there are actually 10 sub-pathways under the anatomy umbrella, and 46 Picmonics there. So courses are basically your general principles. So if you recall, medical curriculum is kind of split between 2. There's a general principle, which is anatomy, biochemistry, physiology, so on and so forth. And then you have your body systems. And we actually do both. So if you navigate to the next bar, that's the body system. So you got your cardiology or cardiovascular system, endocrine system. And then here's what I want to show you. So on the 3rd tab over, you'll see books. So what we did was we actually matched, we went through our entire library, and we mapped our entire content to First Aid's organization indexes. So to a degree where even the pages within First Aid, we can tell you how many Picmonics are on each page. So that's a really great way for you to find topics. Let's say you're using First Aid, you're on page number 47, and you're like, well, I wonder what are the different Picmonics on this page, and you can actually navigate here and find that. And lastly, boards. So we also try to organize things specific for you if you're prepping for USMLE Step 1 versus if you're just going through your normal classes. So with that navigation, let's move on to a more practical scenario. Let's say you just did a UWorld question, and this question has something about penicillin, and you're like, wow, I really need a quick review and some memory anchor to help me remember penicillin. Well, most likely, if you just go to Picmonic, you log in, and on the top here, you'll see this search bar. And if you just type in penicillin, let's say, we'll show you all the Picmonics that are related to penicillin, and you can click on it there and just learn it. So that's a really great way. I remember when I was going through my step 1 and step 2, I actually would use my first aid to review in the morning. I take a full UWorld question. When I'm reviewing each of the UWorld questions, I further would search the right topic within Picmonic's world and find the topic and review that real quick so that I actually recall it and retain it forever. Now, a little bit about the fun stuff. So Picmonic, we know basically how you feel about step 1 and this intense pressure. So what we want to do is actually try to stimulate the other side of your brain. You know, all day you feel tired that you're using the left side of your brain. You're just reading text, you're memorizing, you're doing questions. It's very left brain heavy. And we've learned that the right side of the brain is the creative side, and it allows you to have a different approach to learning something, and it's actually pretty refreshing. So currently we have a quiz feature that's available for our beta users. And so if you log in and there's a beta button, if you click to be a beta user, you'll have access to our quiz. And the quiz basically uses our Picmonic images and actually will, almost in a game-like way, help you remember all the different facts associated with a particular topic. So definitely check that out. So I mentioned earlier we have this thing called the gym mode. This is awesome, by the way. So highly encourage you guys to give it a try. So we do have both iPhone and Android apps. So if you just go to the App Store if you're an iPhone user, or go to Google Play if you're an Android user, and you can actually download the Picmonic app. And when you download it, you have an opportunity for iPhone users, you have an opportunity to download playlists offline. But regardless, you have this option that says learn all, and I've highlighted it here. So what that is if you start learning all of them, the Picmonics will play one after another. So if you pop in your headphones, if you're cool, you have a wireless headphone, doesn't matter, you can actually put it on continuous play, and you can listen to it while you're doing other things. For me, I have to go exercise for 30 minutes, no matter how stressed out I am, because it really definitely helps me continue to stay focused. And I like to pop in my headphones and just go through like 5 or 6 of these stories while I'm at the gym or waiting in line at Starbucks, for example. And it's a great way for you to kind of take a break, because you've been reading all day, you've been using, like I said, the left side of your brain, and now you can listen to some stories to stimulate your memory in a different way. So we call it kill 2 birds with 1 app. Definitely try it out. So now let's move on to the study plan. Now this is probably something a lot of you guys care about. You're I'm guessing about to start this intensive probably 6-week or 2-month process, or maybe a month process, and you're curious, how do I actually get into a good study plan and a study rhythm? And I can tell you, it is all about rhythm and pace. And don't wait. Start figuring that out now. And here's one thing that I wish people had told me, because I kind of didn't think it was a big deal, and I just got going right away and I started studying. And what I learned was that it was actually, at first, I couldn't quite figure out where was the best location to study. Like I remember starting out at a coffee shop, because I figured, hey, I don't have to go to class anymore. It'd be nice to go to a coffee shop. And I tried that for about 3 days. Wasn't really, doing it for me. So then I moved to the library, and then I couldn't really get into a routine there. And then finally, I found a place like at the very top floor of our med school, and there's these rooms that no one ever goes into, and that was what I ended up using. But realized that I had spent close to like 4 or 5 days trying to figure that out, and I felt like I could have used those 5 days more efficiently if I had just known where I was going to study. So the key here is you want to find a place that you can be consistently focused. So if that is a coffee shop for you, that's cool. For me, I just there were people walking around, and it just wasn't doing it for me. Sometimes, like when I have a fresh cup of coffee, I can get real focused, but then over time it kind of wears off and there's too much distraction. So consistently focus. If that's a place at your parents' house, that's fine too. time. So time is really important. Now, I've heard different arguments about when is the best. Some strongly advocate that if you are taking the exam, let's say from 8 a.m. to, let's say, 4 p.m., then you want to, use that as your study time. Now, what I've learned from talking to a lot of students, and we're talking hundreds and thousands of students, is that you actually want to pick a time frame when you're most alert. Because, if you are a night person, don't try to force yourself to be a morning person for about a month and a half. It's just really painful, and you actually should try to maximize your own personal efficiency. Now, I'll teach you a trick later in our trick section on how to actually adjust your biological or sleep schedule to match that of the exam. But for now, just know that it's best, and I highly recommend that you know yourself the best. Find the time frame that you are most alert. For me, I'm actually kind of a night person, so I would study all the way until like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and that actually worked out a lot for me. Break is so important. I think you guys all know this, but make sure you take at least one break every 4 hours. Highly recommend that. Even when you feel like, man, I'm so in the zone right now, just force yourself to take some breaks, because then it really continues to keep you in shape. Nutrition. Can't stress enough, right? You got to eat healthy. I think I went on a fast food binge in the beginning because I was just trying to give myself as much time studying as possible, and then I realized that really wasn't working for me. I was actually feeling kind of gross. So then I got into a healthy diet, and that really got me cruising. And then I mentioned earlier exercise, and this is actually not just me, it's research proven. You guys all know this. We've all taken that exercise physiology class. It's really, really, really important. Make sure you give yourself at least 30 minutes a day. Go out, sweat it out. It'll reduce your stress, improve your sleep, all around. This is a marathon, so you want to take these things seriously. All right, so enough about kind of the background stuff. Let's talk about study schedule. Now, this is probably going to look pretty familiar to you guys. If you haven't, it's basically a screenshot from UWorld. It tells you, okay, this is how you actually select the kind of test you want. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to utilize UWorld in the most effective way. And I'll come back to the screen in a second. Basically, from our experience and from, again, surveying a lot of students, what you want is to do about a minimum of 46 questions a day. That's your minimum. And keep in mind, if you do the math, there's about 2,100 questions in UWorld, so you need about 46 days to get through it. So let's say if you have 2 months to go before your test, that's definitely a nice pace you can follow. But let's say you only have 3 days left. That's okay. You can actually do 92 questions a day. I know it sounds intense, but you can actually break it up. You can do 46 in the morning, review them, and do 46 in the afternoon. So it's still very manageable, and you can get through it in about 23 days. So that's very doable. And I highly recommend you get through the entire UWorld QBank. Now, here are some tricks. Timed is better, and I'll tell you why. When you're taking the actual exam, you get about 1 minute and 20 seconds per question. That pace is very rigorous, and I'll tell you, when I first started UWorld, I couldn't even get through the entire test without running out of time. But because I kept myself disciplined enough to do it timed every session, I was able to then get into this rhythm. I know when to move on to the next question. I know when to flag it. I know when I'm doing well and I feel good because I have this sense of time. So doing time actually trains you almost like muscle memory to know how you're actually going to handle the pressure when the test day comes around. The key here is you want to review the answers. Okay, and I'm going to say this one more time. You want to review the answers. UWorld is known not just for the difficulty level and the quality of its questions, it's the explanation. So this is something that, again, I wish someone had told me. I thought, hey, there's 2,100 questions. I can, do the math. If I just do 46 questions, by the way, if you do a time, 46 questions, that's 1 hour. If I just do an hour, I can probably do like 4 hours of questions a day, and I can get through it in like no time. The problem is I underestimated how much time it really takes to get through the explanation of each question. So my recommendation to you is don't forget to budget about 5 to 10 minutes per question to review, especially in the beginning when you're still trying to learn and expand your knowledge breadth. You really want to dedicate 5 to 10 minutes. You want to look up things that you don't understand, like there'll be stuff in the explanation that you've probably never heard before. Look it up, annotate it in your first aid, and then search Picmonic to help you commit that information to memory. And then another tip is you want to flag the question. So obviously if you got the question wrong, you don't need to flag it because the UWorld QBank will remember the questions you got wrong. But say there's a question that you got right, but you actually guessed it. So a lot of us, are at guessing right questions sometimes just by eliminating 1 or 2 questions, or you just get lucky. Those are the questions you want to flag because you didn't actually get the question right, you just got lucky. By flagging those questions, you can go back later and actually review those questions again if you have time or if you want to. So let's go back here. So again, on the upper left-hand side here, this is the time selection. You can choose the unused questions, and I put 46 to remind you that, it would be nice when you're doing your dedicated Step 1 studying time to give yourself hour-long training sessions, do 46 questions timed, and then spend, comfortable amount of time reviewing the wrong answers. All right. Let's talk about some neat tricks that will hopefully help you get that extra few points on your Step 1. So trick number 1, we talked a little bit about sleep and a little bit about kind of maximizing your day by using the time when you're most alert. But keep in mind, your exam actually is going to force you to have to wake up early, get to the exam site. You want to be at your prime condition, right? So from all the research that we've dug into, and here we present the summary to you, is you want to start going to bed early and waking up early about 5 days before the exam. Now, if you're already a morning person, you're good. You don't even have to worry about this. For those of you that are kind of night people or night owls, you want to give yourself at least 5 days to adjust your sleep cycle. This is research proven. So 3 to 5 days is how long people need to adjust any time biological sleep cycle. So this is a good tip. Trick number 2. Some of you might be wondering, how many NBME practice tests should I take? And what are the ones that I should be taking? This was a question that I personally struggled with. This was a brand new subject for me. I never knew to actually take NBME questions until I got into the middle of my studying. So I've learned from over the last couple of years talking to students that there are a couple of forms that are really great. So forms 13, 15, 16, 17, I've had really great reviews. The other ones, especially the newer ones, I haven't had as many students take them, so can't tell you if they're good or not. But these are the ones that I can for sure vouch for. And my recommendation is you should take an NBME practice test right now, today, or joking, this weekend, let's say. You want to set a benchmark. I know you feel like, man, I'm not ready. I haven't really started studying yet. I'm afraid that if I take it, I'm going to stress myself out. I get it, but you got to overcome that. Take an NBME practice test so you know where you're at. And then for every 2 to 3 weeks, you take another NBME practice test. It really, really helps because not only can you track your progress over time, you'll actually see your scores improve, and the NBME will tell you what are the areas that you're weak. So they'll break down the different topics like microbiology or pharmacology, and they'll say, hey, you're average or you're below average on these topics, and that helps you focus your next 2 weeks of studying on your weaknesses. Now remember, we talked about focus on the resources, so don't try to master all resources. Focus on 1 or 2, I would say UWorld and First Aid, and use Picmonic to supplement or complement that. And you want to focus on your weakness, right? So the NBME practice test will be able to point that out for you. Now this is what the NBME, if you go to NBME's website, on the left-hand side here, you'll see purchase services, and here are the different forms. And you'll notice, I know I get this question sometimes, it's kind of funny, but people will say, should I pay for the expanded feedback form, or should I pay for just the form without feedback? It's a $10 difference, so to be honest, just go ahead and get the one with the expanded feedback, so at least you get some feedback on the questions you got wrong. Versus the basic form, it'll literally just give you a score and you won't be able to actually review the questions. So it's $10 more, just do it. It's not gonna hurt. It's not gonna hurt you in the long run, and it might benefit you. All right. Another question I get about NBME is that how predictive is the NBME? So something you have to know is that the NBME is designed to help people sort of predict their score, right? They give you a practice. Now, the questions come from various different sources. Some of them are sort of retired USMLE questions. Some of the questions are sort of rejects, like the ones that didn't quite make it to the USMLE Step 1 exam. So the NBME is an aggregate of all these different questions, and they actually don't exactly reflect the difficulty level and the style of the question of the USMLE Step 1 exam. So I know that's kind of frustrating, right? You're like, well, I'm doing this practices, and it doesn't even accurately reflect the style and the difficulty level. But the reason why it's so great to do it is because they statistically, remember, Step 1 is graded on a curve, right? So they statistically place you in comparison to everyone else who's taken the practice test. So what that means is if they tell you you're in the 90th percentile, then you're most likely in the 90th percentile. And what I've learned is that the USMLE, the NBME exams predict your score to about a plus or minus 7 points. So that's pretty dang good, right? It gives you some confidence that even though the questions are, some say the questions are actually a little bit easier, the NBME questions are a little bit easier than the actual Step 1, which personally I would agree with that. Whereas UWorld, I would say, is even a little bit more difficult at times than Step 1, which is really great because it really trains you to think at a high level. But that's some nice kind of something that I didn't learn about until afterwards that I'm excited to share with you. Make sure that you take the test and don't doubt it, and review the questions, but just know that the difficulty level is not the same as the actual USMLE Step 1 exam. All right, now for my Step 1 trick number 3. This is something that I was a huge advocate for because it completely changed my speed, my pace, the way I answer question. And the trick is try to answer or try to read, when you have a question in front of you, do your best to read the last couple of sentences of the vignette. This is something that, again, changed my trajectory a lot. And the reason why I say that is because now you're going to get these really long vignettes that go through the entire patient's history and talks about the different findings. And every once in a while, you'll get a question where just by reading the last couple of sentences, you can pretty much figure out the answer. Which, would you rather kind of waste 2 minutes going through the entire vignette, or if you can have a shortcut and know the answer right away, obviously that's the choice we want to go with, right? The other thing that helps me was that even if I can't figure out what the answer is, I can actually frame my mind so that I know what I'm looking for. So if the last question is asking about a diagnosis, then when I'm reading the long vignette, I'm thinking about, okay, what is a diagnosis? What is the diagnosis? What is the diagnosis? If the last question asks about treatment, then I'm like, okay, I'm looking for a disease that I can treat. And what is the treatment? So it frames the question. It also sometimes gives you a shortcut and find the answer. So in this case, this is a screenshot of an actual simulated USMLE exam. So if you read the last sentence, it'll say, what would be the most effective treatment based on this clinical presentation? And guess what? They gave you a picture. And if you were lucky, you would have seen this picture in either UWorld or when you're reviewing first aid. And it should remind you something like a fungus that's and actually based on the description, you'll quickly associate it with Aspergillus. And so for me, it's just by reading the last sentence, I'm looking at the image, I'm going, ooh, this looks like Aspergillus. I skim through the question real quick, and I said, for sure this is Aspergillus, and I know I'm looking for the treatment. So immediately right then and there, I'm going, okay, what is the treatment for Aspergillus? And if you did a Picmonic, that aspergillus picture would have popped, or aspergillus asparagus would have popped into your head, and you would have remembered the treatments are either one of the azoles or amphotericin. So really, this is how kind of everything kind of comes together. You got the pacing down with UWorld. You got the tricks, like how do you actually overcome some of these questions with UWorld. First aid covers the breadth of the knowledge, and Picmonic gives you that memory cue. All right, one more trick for you guys. So, pacing. Remember, step one is not just a test about how much you know. It's a test about how good of a test taker you are. So let's break that down for a bit. To really cover your basis for the breadth of knowledge, right? You have to be able to actually remember all the different facts so that you can actually recognize the right answer, etc. So that's the breadth part. That's your first aid, that's Picmonic, that's using UWorld and reading the explanations. But then there's this other skill set you got to have to do really well, and that's test-taking ability, right? Test-taking tricks. And pacing is one of the key aspects of that. And what do I mean by that? Well, you got to be able to kind of force yourself to move through questions. I have a lot of friends that kick themselves because they couldn't get through some of the sections completely. Remember, you have seven sections when you actually take the USMLE Step 1, and you get a small break in between. They're hour-long sessions, and for each session, the clock's ticking. You got to move through the questions, and you get about, on average, a minute and 20 seconds per question. So if you do the math, you're like, okay, if I spend more than, let's say, 2.5 minutes on a question, I have just potentially cost myself a question at the end. So we developed a strategy, and this is something that you'll find really works, and you can actually practice this. What I'm telling you right here, you can practice it when you're taking your NBME practice or when you're doing the timed UWorld exams. And my suggestion to you is after 2.5 minutes, so you got to keep that rhythm. After 2.5 minutes, you want to just pick an answer, flag the question, and move on. Don't get stuck reading a question for 5 minutes, because it not only kind of throws you off in terms of timing, it kind of gets you all flustered because you're like, oh my God, I just spent 5 minutes on this freaking question. Spending any more time, here's another thing, spending any more time actually does not increase your probability of getting the question right. There's probably a reason why you're struggling with that question, and I tell you a secret, everyone else is struggling with that question as well. So just by you spending more time than everybody else on that question, you're actually going to end up getting a worse score. So just because you spend an extra minute, it's not going to increase your probability of getting the question right, because it's a difficult question. So just force yourself, pick an answer, and move on, so you don't run out of time. And that is my last trick for you. Just want to end with a little phrase of encouragement. So we know that med school is a marathon. You're going to have ups and downs, and hopefully step one is not too much of a downer for you. But at the end of the day, I'm telling you, step one is only a test. I too was there studying for step one and stressing out about it and thinking that it was the end of the world if I didn't do well. But in retrospect, I did well, and it was fine. Now, time for the question and answering. Let me just come over here. Oh, no, my camera's on. Great. All right, so let me take a look at these questions. All right. So we have one from Brian. I take step one in a month. What would you recommend that I focus on? Okay, great question. So if you have a month left, again, if you recall, you want to try to get through first aid, you want to try to get through UWorld. So you want to do more than one full hour-long set. You want to do more than 46 questions a day. Ideally, you get to about 92 questions a day. That'll get you through UWorld in about 23 days, which is amazing, right? And what you want to do is give yourself plenty of time to review. So the best way for you, if you only have a month left, I would recommend that you start your day with a UWorld session of 1 hour, and you review the answers for about, let's say, 2 to 3 hours. You take a break. You take another UWorld question. Again, you review it. And while you're reviewing, and this is the key, while you're reviewing, you're double dipping with first aid. So you actually have your first aid open. And when you're reviewing, you're annotating the answers and the things that you're not familiar with directly in first aid. And then you can look up the really tough topics that you have a hard time remembering. You can look it up in Picmonic and just nail it. Like and our videos are usually less than 2 minutes long. So within 2 minutes, you can nail that topic and move on. All right, next question. Porphyrias, can we get some Picmonics on them? Yes, we can. I will make sure we get that on the list. We have, again, a whole backlog of Picmonics that we're trying to build for you guys, so I'll make sure I get that on the list. Thanks for asking that question, Avi. What are your thoughts on Kaplan test prep? This is from Isabella. This is a good question. So personally, I've actually used the Kaplan QBank, and I've also reviewed some of their videos. And they're great if you, let's say, have a particular topic that you just, no one's ever taught you before, and you're like, man, like my curriculum never covered this topic. Kaplan has these video series that will explain, the entire disease to you. Some other resources you can consider: Pathoma. Again, Pathoma is really great if you haven't used it before. If you only have a month left, I would say you definitely want to focus on UWorld and first aid. But if you have, let's say, 2 months left, you want to try to squeeze in maybe Pathoma. And then Kaplan, really, to me, I think the most beneficial part about Kaplan's whole package is the question banks. So if you have room for a few extra questions, try Kaplan. The Kaplan test prep, I would just say the videos are decent. They explain the diseases and they explain the pathophysiology to you. But again, it's completely up to you. You just have to try it out. Okay. Do you recommend any other resources? Yeah, I think we covered that. So first aid, UWorld. If that's all the time you have, those would be the 2 that I go with. If you have a little bit more time, throw in Pathoma, throw in a few more Kaplan questions, and then you have more time than that, then, again, if you recall, there's a ton of other resources, and it depends on your learning style. Oh, here's a really good question from Yvette. Is studying for 1 year too much? Will I forget the content by the time I take the test? This is a really, really good question. So there was a study done by a group of actually learning specialists that talked about how one of the key determining factors of increasing your step 1 score is actually starting early. So my direct answer to you is no, it is not too much. It is too much if you're stressing about it and you're putting in like 4 or 5 hours a day studying for step 1 for a year long. That's a little crazy. I mean, good for you. You'll probably score like a 270, but it really doesn't require that much effort. What you want to do, again, is pace and rhythm. So if you have a year and you want to start ahead, my recommendation to you is start actually with first aid. First aid provides the framework, call it an outline, that maps the entire, kind of high-yield topics on step 1 for you. But the problem with first aid is, as many of you already know this, they don't really do a good job explaining everything. It's more of a really condensed, very list-based outline. The goal for first aid is you want to actually master that book. You don't want to just read through it. You actually want to own it. Like, I remember I got to a point where I could remember topics when I'm doing UWorld. I could be like, oh, I know exactly what page this particular topic is covered on first aid. That's the level of mastery you want to get to with first aid. Now, some people use Picmonic to actually help them memorize and help them master those facts in first aid. So my recommendation to you is you start with first aid, you go through it, and you want to annotate. And I know you hear this a lot, annotating first aid. What does it actually mean? Annotating in first aid means you want to look up the particular topics in first aid that you perhaps don't have a full understanding of. You can look it up anywhere. You can look it up on Google. You can just Google it. You can Wikipedia it. You can look it up in your textbook. Once you have a better, deeper understanding of that topic, you want to write what you've just learned in first aid underneath that topic, so that by the time you get closer to your step one, you can actually open up your first aid and all of your notes are already aggregated in one place. So that's what I would recommend. Now, the reason why I also throw in Picmonic, if you're a year out, is because if you actually use first aid with Picmonic, those little memory anchors and, you know, cartoon characters and little like pencil villains and fever beavers, like they actually stick in your brain for a really long time. We've done this research study at Midwestern University that showed, you know, an improvement in long-term retention. This is, we're talking months, at over 330%. So the beauty of Picmonic is that if you do start early, you have a higher likelihood of actually remembering the stuff that you've learned. Now, if you don't use Picmonic, you can still start early. You'll be familiar with it, but you may forget the details. So that's the only caveat. Okay. Next question from Hannah. Is studying for, that's you bet. How would you recommend integrating Picmonic with DIT? Wow, that's a great question. So DIT is a resource that, if you recall from my previous slide, focuses on what's called structure. If you're the type of student that says, man, I need someone to tell me what to do and to lay out kind of the plan for me, DIT is a potential resource. I will warn that it's a pretty expensive resource, so make sure it's right for you before you purchase it. I've had many friends who purchased it and never used it, and they regret it for a really long time because it's like $1,000. So make sure you know that's right for you. Now, if you already purchased DIT and you know it's right for you, great. What you can do is DIT actually has, again, you know, kind of a map of topics, and that they provide you with like a textbook, and each section has like a video explanation so you can go through it. Now, remember when I showed you the pathways and I showed you the search function? So the pathways are mapped not just to first aid, the pathways are actually mapped to the general medical curriculum, right? So if you're using DIT and you're going through cardiovascular, you can actually go to Picmonic, find the pathway under cardiovascular, and you can follow along. Now, alternatively, let's say you're using DIT and you have a particular topic that you're like, man, DIT tells me this is important, but I just can't remember it. Go to our search function, type that in. Most likely, we're going to have a Picmonic for you. So then you can just use that Picmonic and then master that topic and remember it for good. Next question. How many hours do people usually study per day? What about hours of sleep? Man, great question. So personally, I put in consistently about 9 hours a day during my dedicated step one study time. So what I did was I actually start getting focused right around 9 o'clock. I wasn't an early morning kind of person, so 9 o'clock was a good time for me. I'd go from 9 to about like a little bit after noon, so maybe like 1 o'clock. So that's 4 hours right there. I take a break, eat lunch, you know, walk around, loosen up, and then I have this problem where between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, I get really tired. Like that's just my normal kind of biological habit, I guess. So I'd use that time and I go exercise. It almost like kickstarts my second win. So from about 9 o'clock to about 1 o'clock, I do a 1 hour UWorld session. I review all the questions. I actually, you know, annotate in first aid and use Picmonic. Take a break for about sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, depends on how I feel, to eat lunch and relax. And then I go from about 2 to 3 on just like these super high yield stuff that I do, either is with reviewing the stuff that I missed yesterday, or the Picmonics that I want to review quickly for that day, or some of the flashcards I made for certain other, you know, minute details. And then I go exercise, and then from about 4 o'clock, or from about 4:30 to about 9 o'clock, that's my second session. So if you do the math, I get in about 9 hours a day, and I take about half a day break per week. Average from talking to other students, I've learned that people on average put in about 8 to 10 hours. Some students are crazy, they'll put in like 13 hours, but it's completely up to you. I think 8 or 9 hours is plenty. If you're efficient about it, if you're focused, that is plenty. And by the way, that's how long your actual exam is going to be, so get used to it, right? In terms of sleep, for me personally, 8 hours is perfect, and I actually really loved my dedicated step 1 time. I felt like I actually plenty of sleep, whereas during the school year, sometimes I have to wake up early to go to class, and that really threw me off. But I felt like I was in such a strong routine that I would fall asleep easily every night. I'd wake up feeling refreshed. So it depends on you. Some students, 7.5 hours enough. Some students need 9. So you can adjust based on your own preference, but don't worry about other people. Don't be like, well, this my friend is putting in 12 hours a day and getting in 6 hours of sleep. That's what I should do. Definitely don't do that. All right. Oh, someone had asked, is this talk recorded on PowerPoint? Can I get a link? Yeah, we'll definitely, I think we did record the sessions, so we should be able to send that to you. Okay, so no worries. Okay, here's another question. What is the average time it takes to memorize a Picmonic? How many passes do we have to do? Sometimes I feel like I memorized it when I returned to review it, and I've forgotten some details. That is very, very normal. For me, it takes me about 3 times to actually master a Picmonic. And what I mean by that is the first time I go into Picmonic, I'll listen to the audio, I'll look at the description, and then I'll try to actually use a review and try to remember it. But I know I'm gonna forget some facts. So what I do is a week, because I put these Picmonics in playlists. So I have playlists grouped by weeks. So my week 1 playlist, my week 2 playlist, my week 3 playlist. And what I do is the following week, I spend about, so for each Picmonic, the first time I go through it, it's about 5 minutes. I don't spend more than 5 minutes on a Picmonic. Just because the audios are short, I can get through it really quickly. And then the following week, I'll actually look at the playlist from the previous week, and I'll spend less than 2 minutes per Picmonic. And what I do, I'll put it in the master view, so it'll cover the entire Picmonic, and then I'll just sort of go through it, see if I can recall all the little details. And if I can't, I'll mark it using the software. It'll say, do you remember this? Do you remember this? Do you remember this? And the ones that I got wrong, I'll just mark it. And that way, then the third week, I'll spend another less than a minute, and usually by then I have it down pat. So 3 passes, each pass no more than 5 minutes, and that's sufficient, I think, to get you. By the way, Picmonics in Picmonic's library, I think there's over 10,000 facts. So imagine yourself being able to actually memorize 10,000 facts. That's pretty amazing, and I've done it, so I know it can be done. In terms of, let's see, there was another question about forgetting details. That's totally normal. One thing that can help is potentially listen to the story and try to use the story to connect some of the more kind of odd or bizarre facts. The other thing you can do is we actually now have the ability for you to add your own facts and characters to, and this is something that didn't exist when I was using Picmonic, but now it does, and our users love it because let's say you're learning something and you're like, man, I really have trouble with this fact. You can actually add your own, and that active learning modality helps you reinforce it even stronger. Like if you added your own character, you for sure are going to remember it. Okay. Would you recommend the USMLE RX QBank since it comes directly from First Aid, or have you been told the questions are not as good? Okay, honestly, so I recently had a discussion with Tal, who's the author of First Aid, and he also created the USMLE RX. Their question banks is great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and in fact, they do a good job tying the questions directly to First Aid. So just there's no problem with RX. Again, when I talk about all the different resources out there, right? If you have all the time in the world, go through everything, right? Go through RX, go through Kaplan. The more question you do, the better you're going to be. But to be realistic, if you only have about a month, or let's say 6 weeks or 2 months left, if I had to choose between UWorld and RX today, I would say UWorld. And the reason for that is because it is tried and true. There are so many students that advocate for it. Me, I personally experienced it, and the difficulty level, right, and the explanation of how in depth they've gone for each one of their questions, and also just the way that they analyze the right and wrong answers and tell you why this question is wrong, and what other setting will you see this answer choice come up. I mean, you just can't beat that. The explanations are so many. So I would say if I have to choose between UWorld and RX today, and I only can choose one, I would say UWorld. But if you already have RX and you have a little bit of time, maybe use RX to help you get familiar with first aid, because those two are in fact directly correlated. I hope that helps. Let's see. Do you recommend learning all the Picmonics? I have a terrible memory. That's my biggest problem. Okay, I will be perfectly honest. I did not learn all the Picmonics. A lot of them, right? I approached it as a need basis. For me, there were a lot of topics in first aid that I just couldn't memorize otherwise. Like I just couldn't read it, and even if I repeat it like 3 days in a row, I'll still forget it in about a week. So in order for me to actually commit, let's say, a list of items in first aid into memory, Picmonic was like my only way out. And it was a really great way out. So for me, there were certain topics in first aid that I knew I had it down pat. Like I didn't even need another form of memory tool. So those I didn't really use Picmonic for. But people are different, right? Some facts stick in your brain better that don't quite stick in my brain. So my recommendation for you is really you don't have to, especially when we're talking about step one, try to like learn every single one of the Picmonics. I would recommend you start with first aid and you use Picmonic to really hone in on the ones that you need help with. That's what I would do. And again, this advice is because of time, right? We want to maximize your time. All right. Oh, thank you, Catherine. We got a comment. Someone loves the add your own fact edition. Definitely use it. It is amazing. I wish I could have used it when I was studying, because there were definitely things that I wanted to add. So now you can do it. Make sure you give it a try. It's going to change your world. Let's see what else. Oh, this is a great question. What score on UWorld will tell you if you're ready or not? Oh my God, I love Marianne, thank you for asking a question. I'm glad you did. So this was a question that I was personally obsessed over. Because I was doing these UWorld questions on random and I was doing it timed, I've always wondered, because the UWorld will give you a score at the end, right? It'll say like 70%, 61%. And you think like, man, I'm scoring. In the beginning, by the way, you're going to score in like the 30s and 40s. And don't freak out. Everybody starts UWorld scoring in the 30s and 40s. But the trick is you start to progress over time. So let's say you have a month to study, and every week you're going to notice that your average test score is actually going up like in a certain pattern, which is really, really great. That's really important. Now, in my experience, I actually got to a level where I was doing random hour-long UWorld questions, and I was scoring in the 80s. Now I was super proud of that, and I think there were a few of my other friends that were scoring in the 90s even. Like that's too much. I think if you're scoring above a 70, you're gonna do great. If you're scoring in the 60s, you're gonna be fine as well. You're gonna obviously be more like the average. I think the average is in the 60s and 70s. And if you're in the 40s and 50s, make sure you do more questions to get yourself to about a 60 or 70. And if you're like really trying to go for that, that 240, 250, 260 score, you want to get yourself to like the averages of like 75% and above. So that's my experience. Also from talking to some of my colleagues who were super gunners, that's what they did. I also have friends who were scoring in the 50s and they still were able to pass. So just know that don't freak out about it. You're going to start out in the 40s, and and you're going to progress over time. So just be disciplined, do them timed, do your NBME practice to continue to gauge who you are, and you're going to be great. Hopefully that helps. All right, next question. Let's see. I take step 1 tomorrow. Ooh. And I'm trying to build a formula sheet to write down on my scratch paper. Any recommendations for formulas? Yes. Go to first aid. Go to the end of the first aid. There's a section, I think it's called like high-yield facts or something. There's like basically, I think like 10 pages worth of just super high-yield path facts, like literally like orphan Annie I, and boom, you need to remember what that is. Kaiser-Fisher ring, boom, you got to remember what that is. So it's the super high-yield stuff at the very end. Be sure to go through that. If you're taking your test tomorrow, good luck. I'm super excited for you, but I'm also super proud that you're listening to my webinar the day before your step 1. So I will be wishing you best of luck. And I think the formula section is back there as well. So hopefully that'll help you. If not, you can email me or email us, and we'll get you something. feedback@picmonic.com. If you can't find it behind first aid, hit this up. Okay. You're welcome. Someone had mentioned about sleeping. Okay, yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure. So again, be sure you go by the schedule that works best for you. Don't worry about trying to bend your natural kind of tendencies a month before the test. Really, you want to be in your best studying condition. So if you're a night owl, just embrace it, and then give yourself about 5 days to adjust before the actual exam. Okay, break. I have a question. Break. What constitutes a break? Bathroom break or hour-long Netflix session? I love it. Game of Thrones, of course. Don't forget that. Any suggestions? Okay, so this is something that actually there's research behind it. So what you want to do is you want to be able to take your mind off of the whatever it is that you're intensely studying, because you want to give the neuroplasticity in your brain, you want to give it some time to form, to shape. You don't want it to actually continues to overcharge, right? So a break, I would recommend personally. So bathroom breaks are not breaks to me. They're just what you got to do. If you got to go, you got to go. But what I mean by breaks, and I'm talking about every 4 hours at least, right? Every 4 hours minimum, you want to take a break, and you want to take about 15 to 30 minutes minimum. So 15 minutes minimum. And by the way, just something to know, that again, I'll be brutally honest here, I wasn't given the advice to manage my breaks when I was taking my actual step 1, and I kind of screwed up. I regret it till this day, so don't do what I did. You get about 45 minutes, I believe, of break for your entire step 1. Smart thing to do would be to take 15-minute break, 10-minute, do like 2 sessions, take a minute, do 2 sessions, take 10-minute, and maybe take a 15 to 20-minute for like lunch, and then another 10 minutes. So you want to manage that break. What I did was I was like, well, I didn't really think about 45 minutes. I thought, man, 45 minutes, that's a lot of time. So I didn't like watch my clock or like actively manage it. So my first 2 breaks, I took like 15-minute breaks. And I was like, oh man, I completely screwed up. And so my the last 6th session of my actual USMLE Step 1, I was only able to take about a few minutes of break, and it totally fried my brain. So don't do that. Actually learn, give yourself a little bit of training beforehand to be like, all right, this is how I'm going to manage and shape my break during my actual step 1. And by the way, for our user who is taking step 1 tomorrow, listen to this. Think about how you're going to use those 45 minutes, and even I know people, now that I've talked to some people, they even will say, all right, during this break, I'm going to eat this, and during this break, I'm going to drink this. And you don't want to drink too much caffeine before the break, because then you get a full session in, and then you start to feel the urge to go to the bathroom in the middle of your exam, and that's the worst feeling in the world. So manage your break and your bathroom breaks And that's just something where you just have to think about before the exam. You have a game plan and you'll be good. Now, in terms of your study break, I would say 15 to 30 minutes minimum, because again, it's a marathon. So don't feel bad for taking a 15 to 30 minute break. And you can actually, I would recommend any more reading, because you've been reading most likely all morning or all night. So what I would recommend is actually go outside, get some sunlight, or if you want to watch a little YouTube video to like laugh. Laughing is a great way to take a break. If there's a particular, I wouldn't go as far as watching a whole Netflix series, because I know about you guys, I'm like super addicted to shows. So the moment I start, I actually get more distracted because now I want to watch the next episode. So I would not start any Netflix series before your step one. So highly recommend. Afterwards, you can binge watch like the entire Game of Thrones, like I don't know, 6 seasons if you want. Like that's totally okay. But if you're about to start your step one, don't do that. But you can, let's say, watch a music video. Some people like that. Go outside, walk around the building. Go maybe call your mom and have a conversation with your family. That's usually a great time to do so. They'll calm your nerve. They'll help you nurse you through the process. So that's what I would recommend for breaks. All right, next question. How many practice tests should we take before taking this step? Well, I think I covered a little bit of this previously. So remember, every 2 to 3 weeks is what I would recommend. If you take it every week, it's a little too much, and it's actually a little bit of waste of time, and I'll tell you why. You may get an incremental improvement, or you may even just flatline, and it doesn't mean you're not making progress. And that's what bothers me, is that if you don't give yourself enough time to improve, taking these practice tests back to back doesn't really help. The other thing about the practice tests is it's going to suck up 4 hours of your time, of your day, and when you take these practice tests, you don't actually get to review those questions in depth just because of the way NBME is set up. They don't let you go and like hyper-analyze these questions, and they don't provide you very in-depth explanation. So actually, UWorld is better for that. Like if you just take 4 UWorld like hour-long sessions, it's equivalent of taking a practice test, but it's just not, meant to predict your score. So NBME, take it for the purpose of predicting your score. And I would recommend take it every 2 to 3 weeks. Personally, I did it because I had a 6-week study schedule. So I did the beginning, I did the middle, and then I did it just before my step one. So I did it that way and saw my score improve each time that I took my NBME, and that was super motivating. And if you try to do it like 1 week intervals, you might not see that improvement, and it can be a little demotivating. And it doesn't really tell you much, because you're like, well, obviously I've only studied for another week. I'm not going to see this huge improvement in my step one score. So I would recommend taking at least 2 NBMEs before your step one, like 1 in the beginning and 1 closer to the end. Now, if you have like, let's say 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you can do in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So that's what I would recommend. Okay. I think we're approaching the 1 hour mark, but let me see if I can get a couple more questions in. And by the way, if you guys have more questions after this, we welcome it. Just email us, feedback@picmonic.com. We'll be happy to help. We want to make sure all of you have your questions answered. And let's see. I'm currently in my pre-internship. Do you think I should study the subjects related to the course I'm taking as I go along from the first? Yes, absolutely. If you're in your pre-internship and you're on a particular subject, let's say you're on cardiovascular or cardiology, then what you can do is you can open up your first aid, go to the cardiovascular system, and go through cardiovascular system while you're getting through your cardio course, and then you can actually start using the Picmonics within those. Now, if you're like far away from step one and you don't want to start using UWorld yet, that's okay. You can actually use like, let's say Kaplan and just do like, let's say the, or use RX and just do the cardiovascular questions. But highly recommend, if you're in your intern year and you're going through cardiovascular system, use first aid cardio, do the Picmonic for that, and then do some questions. I'm planning on doing simulation tests for USMLE. Would they provide me percentile feedbacks? If so, how accurate would this be to an actual USMLE? So I'm hoping simulation tests for USMLE, you mean the NBME. If it is, then it is highly predictive. So NBME, just Google NBME, go to, here, I'll go back to here. So go to NBME, here's NBME, their website, go to the purchase services, and you have these comprehensive basic science forms. Use one of these. Again, if you take it, they'll provide you with the percentile, they'll provide you with what that percentile translates into actual USMLE Step 1 score, and I would say it's about a plus or minus 5 to 7 points to the actual exam score. So it's highly predictive. Feel free to use it. How soon before Step 1 would you suggest getting a UWorld subscription? So personally, I highly recommend that if you're asking that question, you should, and you have your Step 1 coming up, definitely start now, even if you're like 3 months ahead. So my regret was I started my UWorld, so my dedicated study time was 6 weeks. I started my UWorld about 2 months before my exam, and I felt a little rushed getting through the entire 2,100 questions. Again, the reason I felt rushed was that I totally underestimated how much time it takes to review every single question. And that's where the money is, right? Like the explanations for the questions, that's the money. So you want to give yourself plenty of time to review the answers. So my recommendation for you is, if you have the luxury of having more than 2 months, you should get it. You should get UWorld, start doing these questions, and spend plenty of time reviewing. And I know, like, I didn't do UWorld twice. I have friends who've done UWorld twice. I don't really know if they actually did the entire question bank on random time twice. But for me, at least, I was able to review the questions I either got wrong or I flagged. So I call that twice. So give yourself, again, you can start even 3 months before the exam if you have that much time. If you have 2 months left, I would do 46 questions a day. If you have 1 month left, I would do at least 92 questions a day. That's how you get through. Okay, I hope. Okay, one more last question. Did you feel like you reached plateau for your studying during your Step 1 prep? Yes, many times. So this is how it works. You're going to study. You're going to get this huge bump in the beginning because that's when you finally got to focus. So for the first week or 2, some people even 3, you get this bump from, like, maybe you're scoring in the 50s, in the low 60s on UWorld. Maybe your NBME tells you you're scoring like a 200 or 210, and you're freaking out. You're like, oh my God, that's such a low score. Maybe you're scoring in the 190s, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to fail. That's totally normal. In the beginning, that is very, very normal. So don't freak out. You're going to hit this huge bump. For some people, it's like 1 week. For some people, it's 3 weeks. But you're going to hit this bump, and you're going to be like, wow, I'm in like the 220s, and you feel good. You're like, all right, at least I know I'm going to pass. And now the next kind of set of plateaus is what you have to overcome. So you're going to hit multiple plateaus. The first plateau is literally in the very beginning, where you're like, man, how it's more the fear and the pressure than it is really the plateau. It's like psychologically you feel like you're hitting a wall, and then you're going to break through that wall. Everybody does. Trust me, you're going to hit that wall, and you're going to feel great. You're going to break through the first plateau. The second plateau is going to hover around like the average score, like 227 or 220 in the 220s. Like, that's your next plateau. And to break through that plateau, for me, it was when I actually got through the entire first aid ones. When I got through the entire first aid ones, I broke through that plateau, and I was in like the 230s and 240s, and that felt great. And the reason why I broke through is because once you get through the entire first aid book, you actually start to connect the dots. You remember, oh shoot, I remember learning about this drug in this, let's say, cardiovascular section, and now I'm learning it again in this, pharmacology section, and you're kind of tying it together. That bridge is what breaks that second plateau. And then, for me, I was able to break one more plateau, which is when I actually got through the entire UWorld questions, and again, gone through all the Picmonics that I needed for first aid, and that's when I really got to, like, my height. And at that point, you know, I probably could have had another plateau, but I was pretty much psychologically ready to get it over with. So hopefully you have the same experience. If you're hitting a plateau, don't worry, everybody does. And what you need to do is to keep in mind, like, there's still a lot of things you haven't done, and just by doing them, you're going to break through it. Hope that helps. I think we're officially out of time. I really appreciate you all for joining us and sticking through, and hopefully this is something that'll help make a difference, get you that extra 10, 20, even 30 points on your step one. We're here. We want to help you. Feedback@picmonic.com, and let me know how I can help. It's a pleasure talking to you guys. Talk to you later.